Welcome to the Brand Wise podcast, where we talk about the big branding moves that business owners are making and the why behind it. I'm your host, Jess Freeman, here to help you be wise and be bold. I am so excited for y'all to learn from Christina today. We were joking right before we started recording. I think I've interviewed Christina like 3 times. Because yes, I have had 3 different podcasts. And so inevitably every time I'm like, you know what? I need to have Christina come talk. So thank you for coming on the show again, a new show. But to get us started, if someone's listening and they're like, wait, who's Christina? Tell us all about what you do, who you are, all the
Yes,
fun
thank
stuff.
you for having me yet again. I always love coming onto the podcast. I am Christina Olivarez. I am an executive coach specializing in business strategy and visibility for high achieving Latina and women of color CEOs and executives. I am a TEDx speaker and host the conference called Hustle and Socialize here in San Antonio, Texas, and have really been positioning my work that I do all around the themes of unapologetic visibility and being able to step into your power so that you could lead with confidence.
I love that. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about like visibility and social and all that kind of stuff today, but you have also rebranded. We talk a lot about rebranding on this podcast. And you just mentioned like repositioning yourself. So I would love to hear like what inspired you to pivot.
I still have 2 businesses. They're 2 separate LLCs, 2 separate entities. And Social Butterfly Gal was my first business. That first was social media management. So in the first 5 years of my company, I was working on social media management for events, restaurants, fashion brands. And then I launched a second business with a business partner in 2018, which is Hustle and Socialize. And so they were separate brands. They had their own, messaging, their own color palette, websites, you name it. And then in 2022, my business partner made a decision to run for Congress. And so when she made the decision to run for Congress, we were starting to realize that she needed to step aside. And that was when I was realizing I am going to now take over the company. Yeah, I got to keep the name, I got to keep everything, but legally I had to completely rebrand all of just everything, the colors, the fonts, the messaging, so that it aligned with my main brand. I was already about 8 years in business. I just hit a decade. May 2025 will be a whole decade. But now that I was like looking at what life is going to look like with these 2 brands under one entity, that definitely meant that I had to reposition myself. And that's when I officially left social media management. I retired that service after the pandemic. It was just really hard to manage social media accounts. And I retired that and started pivoting into executive coaching. And the conference became, instead of it being, 35% of my revenue, it ended up becoming 70% of my revenue. And so that really I really had to learn what was that going to look like from a strategic branding lens.
I love that. When you say you retired the services, was it like a slow fade or were you like, hello, everyone, effective April 1st, you're on your own?
Very hello everyone effective. That part
Mm-hmm.
came first. That was in 21, and I knew that I was not happy with the direction that my client was going in, and I was starting to already feel that itch of like, I don't really want to do management anymore. And so I actually left the contract about a year early than I was supposed to.
Mm.
And around that time, I mean, my business partner and I were still together. And so I kind of had a feeling I was going to be doing more consulting, and there was this itch of coaching. I just felt it. And then like I would say maybe 6 months later after I left that social media client, that is when my business partner made the decision. And so
Mm.
22 was a trial run. I decided to have a board. I was managing my feelings around being supportive of my best friend. Like, this is not fair. This is not right. It was a lot of harboring
Mhm.
resentment feelings that I had to understand. And I feel like 22, I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall. I was like, we're going to do this messaging. We're going to do this. We're going to do, this look and feel. And it wasn't until I like to say I burnt it all down in order to like rebuild it back up. And when we legally made the decision to officially sign those documents and make it 100% me, that is when I took the process of, all right, I got to get in touch with a new graphic designer. I have to make
Mhm.
both of these websites cohesive and look and feel like my brand. And now I get to create in a way that allowed me to completely play because I felt like
Mm.
I felt like I had to have two separate messaging and two separate languages, and now it was all one. And so it was really scary. There was moments that I doubted myself, but I knew that every step forward, this needed to happen.
Yeah, and messy action is always
Yep.
scary, and I am really glad that you actually shared that some of that process was just kind of figuring it out, because I know sometimes people, especially who are newer in business, you and I have both been out here for a long time. And it can sometimes, I don't know about you, but the times that I've gone through like a I don't know, like I don't know what's working, I don't know what to do. It's not just like a, ooh, this is fun and a little bit intimidating. It's like, what the
Yeah.
crap is happening? And I feel like a failure and I'm supposed to know what to
Yeah.
do. And it's like, most of us don't have business
Right.
degrees. And even if you do, like, doesn't mean you're the leading expert on like going through a
Yeah, and
change
it
in
was such an
business.
interesting year for me because I was regularly going home to help with her for the campaign. And so I was seeing her on a
Mm,
regular basis, knowing that there was still this looming decision because in 22, for that first year campaign, she took a sabbatical. And so technically, she was still 50-50 with me. We hadn't done the split. And
mm,
so it was like, well, how much do I tell her about all of the like the direction and how much input does she still have in the company? Because technically, she still owns 50%. So she still has say in how we run the conference, what speakers we bring, and that was so mentally and emotionally taxing on me. And then I felt like when it came to actually coming to Jesus and saying like, "Hey, we need to like split. Like I want 100%." That was
mm-hmm.
also an emotional factor for me because it was pretty much telling her like, "Hey, we can't be doing what we're doing." And I know that you still want to have a career in politics, and that is something
Right.
that I felt was super scary for me because there was no blueprint. There was no roadmap. It was literally like I
Mm-hmm.
have to figure this out as it comes.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really impressive handling those conversations. I mean, it would be difficult even just business partner, but also being best
Mhm.
friends. Like
Yeah.
that's a whole other layer. Now going back to your business, like I know that you talk a lot about being
Mhm.
visible starts with owning your own
Yeah.
narrative. So with this rebrand process, how did that how did that look for you, owning your narrative through all the ups
I
and
had to
downs?
really niche down and, like I say, be unapologetic about it. I had to be unapologetic about it. I was still in that social media space, so it was really heavy on social media language. The clients that I was working with was not really the ideal audience that I wanted to serve. I was serving more brands and corporations, and I knew that where I felt my zone of genius, it was on that individual level. So I had to get really
Mm-hmm.
clear on who am I targeting and how to call it out to call it in. And that meant like saying, "Hey, I'm going to focus on this set of audience and be okay with it. So, for example,
Mhm.
my zone of genius is working with minority women, women of color, and Latinas. I'm, from the border in South Texas. And a lot of the clients that I was working with, you could tell that they were drawn to me. And that doesn't mean I exclude other people, but I could just sense that, hey, there is a message, there is a story. And a lot of the work that I was doing in Hustle and Socialize was around minority business women. And so part of the rebrand
Mhm.
was the messaging and the language and actually calling that part out. And I will tell you, I've still to this day, I have women coming into my DMs saying, why do you only focus on that? And don't you think your services are for all? And, it, every time I get a message about that, I'm like, oh, it's clear. I need to double down, right? And so it was that language, and then also understanding how I'm gonna position myself in the market. So if I'm going to be positioning myself in the market, what does that look like and who's doing it? And if no one's doing it, how do I be that standout person that's doing it? And I think that that's kind of like what I saw in the rebrand was it wasn't, I have a really big local audience in San Antonio. I've been established as that social media go to expert. So now I had to completely shift that, leave that identity behind, and start educating people that, hey, that was, I'm still social media. I love it. But now we're going to focus more on that leadership component of that visibility because the clients that I was working with in social media were struggling with that. And so before we could actually post on social, we need to get very clear on why there is a hesitation on the visibility component. And that's what I was starting to learn throughout that whole rebrand process.
I just really want to point out that you specifically said, people are coming to you like, why are you doing this? Why, no, 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 like being mad about it, whatever. And instead of you being like, oh man, like maybe I shouldn't do this, you were like, I'm going to
Yeah.
double down and like make my message even more clear. I'm going to like lean into this even more. And I think that is such a good example of owning the narrative and really also building a business that you love, working with the right
Mhm.
people, even if it makes people mad because this is my
Right,
business.
right. And I think during that component time of like figuring out what the messaging was going to be when I was looking at things, I remember I had somebody on my board at the time, the board, and she even said it. She was like, "Well, you could lean into it, but no, when you lean into it, it might repel, other people." And when she
Mm.
said that, I was like, "Okay, yeah, let's lean into it." And it's actually like ever since I really completely niched down, same point of what you said. Like, I had a woman last night actually buy a ticket to this year's conference, does not fit the quote unquote messaging that we have, but she is drawn to my brand and she is a complete advocate and ally. And those are the people that we want in the room with us. And so
Mm.
I think like
Mhm.
that speaks to the brand that I am building. It's like it is fully like we're not exclusively saying it's for this type of person, but I know that the people that I serve, those are the ones that need this conference, this coaching, this leadership the most. And we're going to keep, doubling down on that fact.
Okay, now a little bit ago you mentioned, sometimes people are hesitant and we need to like get into why is there hesitation
Mhm.
around this? And I know that when a lot of my clients and community are rebranding, repositioning, whatever you want to call it, and they're wanting to get more visible, then this struggle with
Yeah.
imposter syndrome comes up.
Yep.
And whether that's why people are hesitating or it's something else, like we all have some kind of struggle, I feel like at some point with that. So, what advice do you have for people who are hesitating for
Yeah.
whatever reason when it comes to their
A lot of it
visibility?
is inner work, inner healing that we do have to work on, especially for a lot of women
Mhm.
that I've worked with for so long. So many of them were often told as a little kid to not be visible, to not speak up, to not ruffle feathers.
Mhm.
And I think that that's also one of the reasons why we're so nervous about putting ourselves on camera And also a lot of it comes from I'm not worthy of sharing my story. So it all goes back to,
Mhm.
diving deep, asking some really powerful questions, and then really digging deep into what I like to call my step into your power framework, where it's actually figuring out 3 to 5 core pieces of your story that stand out into why you do what you do, and leaning
Mm.
into that and sharing that message, because there might be another person listening that needs to hear this exact message, and really figuring out like what is my voice, how to amplify that voice. And so it is super valid. I still get imposter syndrome sometimes. Like I remember one time I wanted to come in kind of like spicy and say something, and I was so nervous about putting it out because anything in today's social media world can be cut and paste and made it seem like you said something else when you didn't. So it's completely valid, but I think it's just like honing in on your unique strengths, your story, and your voice, and how you want to put that out in the market. And realize that, and I think because we've been in the game for so long, something that I've had to come to terms with is blocking out the noise. So I love
Mhm.
following, women who do the exact same thing as me, but I was starting to recognize that I was trying to be like them instead of
Mm.
actually figuring out what is my strength and and so sometimes I had to just either mute their content or unfollow if it was too much, and start journaling a little bit more and start figuring out like how to not second guess my own voice, because it's very easy to
Mm.
second guess your voice in a world that is constantly being fed other people's voices.
Yes, and I talk a lot about with health pros and fitness people and everybody, like, there's so much
Oh my gosh,
misinformation
yes.
online in the
Oh.
health space, like, it's ridiculous, and I know people listening are like, yeah." And I just keep encouraging them, like, you have to stand up and speak out, like, you have to own your voice and have those bold opinions, like, that's going to help you reach the right people and attract
Yeah.
the right people. And it also is, for the sake of the people who follow or hire you or whatever, like for the sake of their health, like we literally are dealing with people's health, like they need the right information. And so we can't be afraid.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yes. And, like, actually carving out space for that. Like, I think I've been very
Hmm.
intentional throughout the last couple of years to power down and carve out space for that, because it is so needed.
Hmm. Now, for the people who are maybe like changing their entire niche or their content, kind of like you did, like moving completely away from social media management, how do you go about, what's your advice for making that shift, on Instagram, the website, like whatever it is, without alienating their existing
Mhm.
audience, even though sometimes it may be a totally different
Yeah.
audience. So like I'm like sometimes you just may
Yeah.
have to. Like if you're switching from men to women or women to kid, like you just may have to alienate. But like if it's a shift, like still may some of the same people, like what's your
3
advice there?
things. Number 1, and I'll go through each of them. Number 1, first, be transparent and say what you need to say directly to your audience so they are fully aware of the shift that's going to happen. Number 2, start
Mhm.
testing. Do little bits of pieces. For sure, I feel like getting the messaging right, testing, and then number 3, analyze and refine. And one
Mhm.
thing I love about AI and ChatGPT is you are able to grab pieces of your content, transcribe it,
Mm.
put it into these AI tools, feed it what you really want, and start, going through what you need to shift. I feel for me, it
Mhm.
was such an identity shift for me because I was a little lost on what I should start creating, because for the longest time, I was doing nothing but content that was about social media tips, social media hacks, social media, whatever. And when I started working with specific clients, one of the things that I would do the most is I have a questionnaire, and I would analyze the question, like I would analyze the answers that they would have in the questionnaire to better my content.
Mm.
And I really was transparent with my audience when a lot of people first did not know that I was rebranding. And it was kind of like gradual. Like I think it was the first conference in 23 when I had it. They were like, "Oh my God, I had no idea that your business partner left. It was really smooth." Like you would never know
Mm.
that this was all going down behind the scenes, right? But I was very
Yeah.
transparent with my audience and saying, like, "Hey, I'm taking this 100%, and this is what you're going to get from me now." And I think that that's really important, like
Mhm.
those three things. But I think also to get very, very clear on your mission and vision, and something that we should be focusing is like those core values, and how is that going to translate now into your new brand? Or if it's not a new
Mm.
brand, if it's just a shift, because that is also going to be the determining factor of who's going to stay and who's going to leave. And to fully get
Mhm.
clear on those things, because it's also going to be the roadmap into the social media content that you are creating.
I did make an announcement when I rebranded, and then when I like a month later or so, well, it was like 2 months, it was like, "Oh, I'm going all in on this health and fitness niche," which I think most people were like, "I
Yeah.
thought you already were." But I was like, I was like mostly in it, and now I'm like
Yeah.
fully in it. I think I did have obviously like some people unfollow, but mostly it was people already following me who were like, "Yeah, of course." Like they were like, "Great." And so like yes, it was like nerve-wracking to put it out there even though I felt so good about the decision. It was a little nerve-wracking to be like, "Okay, like I'm saying this like even though this is a lot of my audience already, like saying it like feels so permanent even though it's business, it doesn't have to be." But yeah, it was just making that and then letting people know like you can stay or you
Yeah.
can go, like it's up to you. So I think that's really good things to think about that you mentioned. So thank you for sharing that because I know people like making the shift can feel so
Yeah.
big, like especially with you like talking so granular about like social media tips and hacks and all those things. Like I know some of my dietitians and stuff, like they may have this particular niche and they're like, "Oh, but I want to like change my niche, which would be totally different topic." And it's doable. Like it's not the end of the world. And you didn't, I'm assuming, didn't like start a whole new
No,
Instagram
no.
or
And in
anything.
fact, I think it
Right.
also helped that now Instagram has like the collaboration tool, and you can, right? So
Mm,
around that time when they launched that, it was perfect timing, because one thing that I have been trying to do a little bit more in my content and in the programming of the conference is in my coaching, as well, position the conference as the funnel to my coaching. And that
mm,
collaboration tool helped so much, because now I can add posts that directly align with that audience. And then I can shift in the messaging. And so I didn't start another Instagram. Like I have access to the Hustle and Socialize Instagram before. Like I just changed the password,
right.
right? To legally.
Mm-hmm.
And in the legal process, because I think that was the toughest part, was also like the legalities of it, because I didn't know she was going to allow me to keep the name. And what does
Mm,
that look like from an image likeness perspective, because she still was part of the
mm-hmm.
origin story. And that's really kind of like what we agreed upon was, we didn't want to have her name in it anymore. And so I had to make sure that any type of content on the website and social media didn't really have her face or her name. Um, and I
Mm,
think like that was super helpful. But I felt a little nervous anytime I would promote my coaching to that audience, because I was like, it's always been separate. Like I mean, the other
mm,
offers were
mm-hmm.
always separate, and now they're not. And so there was this hesitation of, am I being too salesy? And kind of getting over that, because of course I need to market to that audience. And I think that's where the creation of just more aligned content was something that I really had to. be okay with.
I mean, that's a lot of details to think through, but I love that now you can do the
Mhm.
collab post, which yes, thank
Yeah,
you
thank you,
Instagram
Instagram.
for
Oh my gosh, yes.
that.
All the time.
Yes. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about. I know a lot of my people in the health and fitness space, they feel like they kind of have to fit into these like industry norms and like, oh well, this is what we do as dietitians, well this is what we do as personal trainers, and whatever, and they just kind of fall in line with everybody else. So I'm curious, what your approach is to with visibility and showcasing like this is what makes me unique, whether for yourself or for clients, and like showcasing like, hey, this is, I'm different. Is it messaging? Is it like, oh, you have to choose a really different color and be different, or
I like to call it the secret sazon, which is like, flavor. Sazon in
mm-hmm,
Spanish is flavor. And that's a process of going through what completely makes you unique and why would I want to hire you versus the other personal trainers out there or dietitians out there, right? So it's
mm,
actually getting a process of getting clear on not just your messaging, but the personality traits and also the going back to the core values, what are your core values and how does that align with
mm-hmm,
the business that you have? What are some things that you do that no one else does? And piecing that
mm,
into owning your narrative, piecing that into like this is my company, these are my core values, and this is what I do that no one else does. Because I think like so many people, you could, whether it is dietitians or personal trainers, it's so easy. In fact, one of my clients was a personal trainer, and it's so easy to fall in line of like, oh, well, this person does videos this way. And we don't want that. We want you
mm-hmm.
to shine. And so it is figuring out specific details that are key to you in the process of that step into your power framework.
I
Mhm.
love that. Yes, like figuring, I think sometimes, I know for
Mhm.
me, we overthink like, oh, like what makes me different, and just thinking about the personality, like what's one thing you do different, like it's those little details. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I design websites while I stand on my head. That's what makes
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
different. Like, like it can be those smaller details, and we all know like it also a lot comes back to just our voice and our
Mhm.
messaging. And yeah, because there are literally millions
Yeah.
of web designers, but like how many do you know that talk about Diet
Right.
Dr. Pepper as much as
Exactly.
me? And are they going to hire me because of it? Probably not.
Yeah, it's like the personality part to it. It's like it feels like I could totally vibe with you.
That's why I always tell my people, put some fun facts on your about
Mhm.
page. And they're like, what? Like, why? This feels like the cheesy icebreaker you do at like networking. And I'm like, you would be
Yeah.
shocked how often I have inquiries who will say something like, oh, like, also, I love
Yeah.
Gilmore Girls like you do.
And people buy from people who they know, like, and trust. And I think I've seen it a lot in the inquiries I've gotten as well, where it could be just the most random things that I've shown on Instagram or stories. And that was one factor that they mentioned in the, is there anything else you want me to know about you? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that also showcases like your determination, your motivation, what type of person you are going to be when you work with them because people want to
Mm-hmm.
feel connected and they want to build that before they purchase or before they make a huge investment. They want to know that their best interest is in
Yeah.
hand, and so that's why it's like whatever type of secret sazon you can bring to your content, you can bring to your messaging is going to really set you apart.
Mm, love it. Okay. Final question. One piece of advice you would give to the listeners, the health and fitness pros listening, about stepping into the role, like being the face of their brand in 2025 and, getting more visible
You
there.
cannot outsource you. At the end of the day,
Mm.
you are the magic. You are the person that is the secret sauce. And I feel as if it could definitely be scary, and all of those things are true and valid. But now more than ever in today's world, we need to have your voice. So you can't, yes, ChatGPT can help. Obviously, I use it a lot. But you need to be front facing because that's how people do business nowadays. If I'm going to someone's website and I don't see anything, I am not going to trust it. And I've gone to
Mhm.
specific websites where it looks fake. And it's just like, I don't know if this is real or not, you know? And so I think
Right.
it's now more than ever very important to be visible and also to have that nature of you amplifying your voice because there are a lot of things going on right now where we cannot trust like things and we need to be the person in our community.
Mhm.
We need to be the people in our community that is going to be uplifting, and it starts with us, really.
Yes, thank you. Good advice, good advice. Okay, so where can we connect with you? Maybe
Yeah.
buy tickets
And
for the event?
yes, you can connect with me on Instagram at the social butterfly gal and also on my website, thesocialbutterflygal.net. Hustle and Socialize tickets for our 2025 conference will be going on sale March 3rd. And our conference is Friday and Saturday, June 6th and 7th in downtown San Antonio, Texas. I hope everybody joins us. It's going to be an incredible year. We have a great lineup of speakers. I can't wait to reveal them. But yeah, you can find all the information on my website, socialbutterflygal.net, which will also take you to Hustle and Socialize's website as well.
Awesome. I will link that in the show notes. But thank you again for being here. Are you a squiggle or a square? Go to justcreatives.com/quiz to find out where your brand ends up and find out what a square or squiggle even means. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to leave a review or share it on Instagram and tune in next week for another episode.